Hi, this is CS170. We're going to use this lecture to finish off Chapter 2. So where we left off for the last time, we left off on consistent interface. So we're going to come over here to metaphors right now. We should finish this off. I'll leave with a couple of review and questions. We can use that as part of your extra credit that you can send over to me later on. So let's go from here. So again, I picked up on this. If you go into the files and look at the resources, you'll see week 1 resources. That's what I was working on for this week. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we're here on desktop, and desktop leads us into our discussion about metaphors. So what we're seeing here is this early, basically old command line type of interface. You see a lot of these type of things when it came into like mainframes and whatnot. So basically you have a list of all of these different options. You can punch in a number here, and you have like these function keys that you can hit to do various things. So this is something that essentially was around a couple of decades ago. Then you step forward a little bit, then you get into this idea of a graphical user interface. And this kind of really brought the idea of visualizing your interaction, just like you would have a desktop, your office desk. So there's a couple different things to that, which I'll get to in the next slide. But you can see the one of the key points here is designed for office use with a metaphor of the screen being a desktop. Okay, so I'll go a little bit more into that for your next slide here. So you can see here, you have this idea of like these different things that you might normally find on your desk, I guess back in the day. And you would be interacting with this, with the computer, as if you were interacting with different things on your desktop. So you might have a calendar on your desktop, you might have a little calculator, you have this clock here, you'll have a concept of a file cabinet that you can file things away, organize things, put them into different folders, stuff like that. So that's what they think of as a metaphor. So here you'll see these sliders and whatnot, and dials and buttons. So it's almost like you're interacting with, let's say, you have a piece of equipment on your desk. How you might actually interact with it to, let's say, raise the volume, to increase the brightness of the screen, you know, different types of things. And it's almost like how you would deal with it in the real world. So they translated that into a graphical user interface, and that's how you would interact with the computer via this GUI. Okay. Here you have a couple of different things here. Just from looking at these pictures, you could imagine what they are. So you see something like this. This probably looks like an envelope, looks like something you might want to hit the email on. You see like something like this. This looks like something in terms of a signal, right? So maybe your Wi-Fi connection. This looks like a camera. So just look at these different types of things, and you might figure out or guess what these things might mean. This looks like a sound type of thing. This looks like a calculator, so on and so forth. Um, Here, this just alludes to some of the history around Apple and the idea of using a mouse to navigate to your user interface. Um, and here, the idea of a touch metaphor, so you kind of saw that with Apple, let's say on iPad, obviously on the phones. So you have a little bit less desktop space to play around with. So, with the touch screens, it's a little bit more efficient to interact, uh, by touching the screen to to navigate, to move things around. So you probably see stuff like this where you have the movie, and then you can swipe left or right to kind of spin these things around to see your different options here. Um, so that's kind of what you're talking about with a touch metaphor. Okay. So this basically just talks about you making that transition from using the mouse to the touch in terms of interacting with the computer. And like I alluded to before, you're talking about like small screens. That's why you want to get into the touch metaphor. And talking about a mouse, just like usually for your laptops and whatnot, you're probably not going to carry around a mouse. Although some of the people might still use a mouse with the laptop, but you got to set it up somewhere. Um, and then definitely you're not going to use a mouse with a phone, right? So that's just talking about the different reasons why we've evolved to more of a touch metaphor, especially as things have gone more and more towards things like a phone as your primary computing option. Okay. Something that is not necessarily part of uh, the learning objectives, but it's covered in the book, and we'll also cover it. Is basically the idea of reproduction. So there's different ways to copy things, but one of the things about digital is the idea of like perfect reproduction. Okay, so because everything is stored as zeros and ones, digital, um, you should be able to perfectly copy that, right? Assuming no compression, right? And we can get into different types of compression that may or may not involve some loss of quality of data. Um, and I'll contrast that to something where uh, it's more analog, and you do get a loss of quality with each time you make a copy, whether it's like recording like some old movies um, or even recordings of sound. So all of that, every time you make a copy, it's just going to lose quality because it's not going to be a perfect reproduction. Okay. So this kind of just reiterates what I was just talking about. So in encoding the information as zeros and ones, so you can get perfect reproduction, right? So your second copy is just duplicating exactly the same sequences of zeros and ones. Here, right? So the idea here is which one's the original, which one's a copy. They're exactly the same because it's a digital picture. So there is no degradation based on the copy. Okay, so that's all that means by perfect reproduction. Okay, later on we're going to get into stuff like with compression and whatnot where you could lose quality over time. Okay, but for what we're going to cover right now, all you have to know is perfect reproduction. You can achieve that with digital because it's just copying over zeros and ones. Okay. Copy and pasting, find and replace. These two things, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this already and how you interact with things. So I just brought up a little bit of a document here in Microsoft Office, and you can basically do something like, oh, you do a find, and I don't know, let me say import 10. Okay, so I do Control F, right, and you can see important, 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 right? So the things I search for, and you can see the references here on the left side too. And this goes back to what we mentioned earlier in the other lecture when we talked about consistent interface, right? So the idea of either hitting a Control F or Command F, right? That's in common for a lot of different applications. It doesn't even have to be Microsoft apps, right? So if I went into like Google Sheets or something like that, and I did Control F, it'll be the same thing. It'll basically be trying to find something, finding a string in this case. And if I did something, let's say in Apple, right, Apple Docs or something like that, I would do like a Command F, and the same thing, I would be doing a find, right? So copy and paste, you can see up here, right? So let's say I had this whole paragraph here, right? Obviously, I just did a Control C, you didn't see that, but maybe I should just do this so you can see what I'm doing. So copy, and then I can do a paste, right? I could even paste in different ways, right? But let me just do a regular paste here. Okay, so it just basically took this and this. Many of you have probably already seen this, right? So you can do a copy and paste all over the place, right? And it doesn't even have to be within the same application. So I could take something from Excel, PowerPoint, or whatever, like just for the heck of it. Let's say I did this, and I did a copy here, and I went over to here, and yeah, just jam in another slide here. And I do a paste. Okay, so all I did was I copied from here, copied all the text over to here, right? I'm sure many of you have done this already, so that's just demonstration of copy and paste. Okay, so you can copy within the document, you can copy across applications. So basically there's like a little area that it stores this information and it's available to other applications, right? You just copy and paste it over. So it's a pretty simple concept. So that's out there. And I would just kind of tie this back to some of the earlier discussions about consistent interface. So the idea of a copy and a paste is all over the place, whether you're using Microsoft products or you're using Apple products or you're using Google, whatever, any of these type of things. The idea of finding something, replacing it, copying it, and pasting it is a very common idea. So it's often out there. And the buffer I was referring to, I guess here in Microsoft land, they'll call it a clipboard, okay? So let me close this out. I don't need this anymore. And let's go back to here. So copy, paste, find, replace. That's fine. Should be no problem with that concept here. So this is just a quick check. Again, it ties back to our learning objectives. So you guys can just think to yourself, what do we mean by UI, right? Or UX, right? These are two different things. You shouldn't really mix the two together. Perfect reproduction, right? So think about it as analog. So I gave you an example before. Analog would be something like a videotape or like a phonograph record, something like that. And digital information might just be anything that you pretty much have on your computer. A picture, a digital picture, MP3, MP4, whatever, any of that kind of stuff. And then what is the purpose of displaying progress bars, okay, when an item is loading. Okay, so you can remember that from the last lecture. Okay, and here basically it's just a recap of some of the learning objectives here. So you can refer to that. That's also back in the other document. So that pretty much completes everything. So one thing I'm going to ask is, as part of me collecting feedback from everyone here, and also for all of you to get some extra credit, we'll give you a little bit of extra credit. I'll just make some notes in Canvas for each of you if you send me an email, is this idea of UX, right? So I think you can probably think of many examples of what a good UX might be. So I'm going to ask each of you to think about UX in the context of your experience using Amazon. Probably most of you have used Amazon in some shape or form. If not, you can probably do a little bit of a Google search and find a lot of references talking about Amazon and UX and some of the things that Amazon took the lead on in terms of UX and how it used that to basically build up its loyalty, its user community, and user loyalty to the experience that they get on Amazon compared to other e-commerce options that existed in the past, right? So many of you know that Amazon's been quite successful, starting off with just selling books to selling just about anything these days. But it's not like from day one there was no competition. There was a lot of people trying to compete in the e-commerce space, and Amazon has really taken a good chunk of that business based on its leading edge developments on UX. So I'd like each of you to send me an email and just share with me some ideas and thoughts about how did Amazon take the lead on UX, some notable I would say inventions on UX or ideas around UX where Amazon took the lead. If you can send that to me, it doesn't have to be long. I'm not asking for a long paper or something like that. Just a couple sentences, whatever you want to put in there. And again, you send me emails. You can also send me emails asking me questions and whatnot. I just want to hear from you. So go ahead and do that. And I look forward to seeing you for either office hours or next week's classes. All right. Thank you. Good luck. And see you soon.